Welcome, everybody. Welcome to DADAcation. Today we have an amazing episode. Here today we have Frank. Frank, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thanks, Abe. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. Can you let the people know your name and what you do?
Yeah, my legal name is Francesco, so it's Francesco Solitero, and I have worked in drug discovery for the last 36 years now. I'm an organic chemist by training, and some of my first jobs were in the lab at different pharmaceutical companies, and I've been doing that for 35 years. I've gotten out of the lab, of course, but yeah, I've worked in pharmaceuticals for a long, long time now.
Wow, that's amazing. I actually didn't know the number of years you were in the lab.
Yeah, my first job I started in August in 1986.
Wow.
And I think I had it down to the day. I think it was like August the 4th or something like that.
Wow.
And it's because one day I had found some old notes, and it was from the pile of notes was dated like October 5th or 6th or something like that. And because I knew that company, they started their people always on a Monday, so I was able to find exactly the date that I started.
Isn't that amazing to save those type of notes and just look back?
You know me a little bit, but I don't know, maybe you don't know this about me, but I really like numbers. And anniversaries and things really kind of mean a lot to me.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You find a lot of things kind of coincide sometimes. If you look close, you can find some really interesting things.
Wow. No, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Once again, welcome to DADAcation.
Thank you.
Today, you know what DADAcation is about.
Yes, I've heard about it. It sounds like it's a really great initiative, and I'm glad you're doing it.
Absolutely. Thank you. So let's get to it. So, the first thing I usually start with is, DADAcation is all about fatherhood and bringing a lot of positivity towards fatherhood and everything around it, and why fathers, are important, and why both a child needs both parents in their lives.
Absolutely.
Tell me a little bit about your background as a child, having your father and
wow.
your parents.
Oh man, I had a pretty amazing childhood, and it was really all centered around family and extended family. So my history really stems from I'm the first generation of Italian immigrants. Both my mother and father immigrated to the United States back in the 50s. Well, my mom immigrated in the 50s, and my dad a little bit later. I'll get into that in just a couple of minutes. But it started out mainly with my mom and her dad. On my mom's side, most of my closest relatives, aunts and uncles, grandma and grandpa, immigrated. So my mom, one of her brothers, and my grandpa came over in 1955. They kind of got settled, and there was an older member of the family. That's a whole nother story. That helped them to get established, and this was in Wisconsin, in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Probably heard about all that in the news lately. Yeah. But they moved there. My mom went back in 1957, got married, got pregnant with me, and then came back to the United States. And my father had to stay back for immigration reasons. So he wasn't able to come until I was 2 years old. And we can talk a little bit more about that as well. But the whole general growing up, your question about that and that whole aspect of growing up, extended family, was just tremendous. It was a lot of ethnicity, of course, because we were right off the boat. The neighborhood that we lived in Kenosha was pretty much the same thing. It was mostly Italians and mostly immigrants and first-generation folks. Kenosha was a really nice Midwest town, and it seemed to be kind of segregated based on the church groups and some of the ethnic groups. They kind of just stuck together, but they also intermingled in the churches. So the school and the church that I grew up in, which was another big part of growing up, that was just amazing for me, was a Catholic school called Mount Carmel Catholic School, and we had mostly Italians, and there were a good number of Mexican kids as well. And even though the neighborhoods were a little bit different, this was the spot where everyone got together, and with the park and the playgrounds and the school and everything. It was really great growing up. And again, back to the whole family thing. The whole extended family it's just all centered around Sundays, walk into church. I'm just telling you things that kind of come to the top of my head when I think about these things. Walk in the church with my family on Sundays, Italian dinner on Sundays, holidays and everyone getting together. Gardens. My grandpa and my dad were amazing gardeners. They each had a garden at their place in their old homes.
Is that where you take from today?
Yeah,
I was in the garden.
I did, but it took me a while because I went through those years of my dad was trying to tell me what to do, and I was like, no, I'm smarter than that. But I ended up really learning a lot from him, of course, and that was really one thing that was really important. Sunday or during the summer, just playing outdoors with kids and everything, and we would have family and friends over for like a backyard watermelon during the week, and I just loved those times. So growing up was really fantastic. There was music all the time, and I think that's where I got my musical background, that appreciation. God, I can go on and on and on, but it was a tremendous backdrop for growing up and experiences, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. It was fantastic.
That's amazing. Yeah. One thing I want to point out, what you said, basically, it revolves around the saying, "It takes a village to raise a child."
Yeah.
It's just amazing that you had all of the family behind to help you.
Yeah.
And help your parents and etc.
Yeah.
How was that experience? Because there's a few people, there's a few different types of people that that didn't have that.
Yeah.
For you, what was the positivities? Like, you mentioned a few, but how did that make you feel, and how did you feel like it made a difference in your today's life?
I think it made a tremendous difference because my experiences came from all around me. It wasn't just my dad, although my dad was certainly a very, very important figure. But it was a lot of the other extended family, my aunts and uncles. My uncles in particular, I would say it kind of ranged because their ages were a range. My youngest uncle was like 6 years older than me, and then my oldest uncle is about 20 years older than me. So the relationships I had with my uncles was really special, but each one was different.
Right.
My uncle Gerardo, for example, the younger one, is kind of more like a brother, and talking about raising me. Talking about raising in a village, he used to allow me to hang around with his friends, even though they were older than me. But that got me assimilated as I was growing up into the whole neighborhood with the kids. There was one thing I didn't mention, and I honestly don't remember this, but I'm told by my mom and other relatives that I didn't speak a word of English until I was 5 years old.
Wow.
And that's because we were in the house, extended family, and that's where my world was. But as soon as I started getting outside into the neighborhood, and then eventually going to school, I started learning to speak English. And I mean, your comment about taking a village, that's where I learned
Right.
to speak the English language initially, and it's really interesting. But my Uncle Jerry was more like a brother figure. And then moving up the line with some of my other uncles, they were father figures of sorts. There was one thing that each of them had kind of special that I used to do with them, things that they taught me over the years. And I never really thought about it that way when it was happening as I was growing up. But, these later years, when you think about your relationships, and some of them have passed, and what they really meant to you, you kind of think back and make sense of it all. And this was the purpose of my relationship with my Uncle Mario, or my Uncle Louis, or my Uncle Mike, etc. So those were really special parts of growing up, and influenced my childhood quite a lot.
That's important. So they all left you with something that made you realize that, you thought back like, you appreciate them for, telling you this or doing this.
Yeah. And then of course my dad was kind of pulled it all together, of course, and just some tremendous life lessons that he left me with. He passed it was about 6-7 years ago now.
Wow.
He was 85 when he passed, but he lived a really good long life. But he taught me a lot. He taught me a lot of things, some of which by doing and teaching me how to do it, other things more by example, and other things just kind of passively. Just how his whole demeanor, and how he interacted with people, and how he faced certain situations, and those were all learning experiences, I think, too.
While we're here on this topic, what is one important thing that he's told you in your childhood life that stuck with you till today?
I tell you just the first thing that came to mind. Okay. And it's a little bit of a fun one, but I think there's also a lesson there, a really, really big lesson. Quite honestly, there was a period of time. I don't know. I must have been 10, 11, 12 years old, something like that, and I had got into the habit of kind of sassing back at him pretty much every chance I could get. Because I was like a really smart kid back then. And I was doing that for a while. I was on a streak, and then this one time, I could still picture, I was in the kitchen of our old house, which is a pretty small place, and he asked me or told me something, and I sassed back at him, and he gave me a look that I would never, ever forget. And I don't even think he really said much. But that was the last time I sassed back at him. And it sounds kind of fun, but I think it was actually, kind of a lesson there. It's how you treat people. Treat people with respect.
Absolutely.
And, maybe at the time I didn't think about it in that vein. I just thought about it within the vein of, if I keep doing this, I'm going to get the belt one of these days. And I didn't want that.
The look.
Yeah, but I think, I think that was one of the lessons. It was treat people with respect, and treat them how you would want to be treated.
Absolutely.
And, that's really how he was. His demeanor around people, his friends, the people that he worked with, he was loved by a lot of people, not just our family. He really had a knack for just being a really good person and a nice person to be around.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how many kids did he have? So how many AKA how many siblings
Oh,
do you have?
do I have, or did my dad have?
Well, I guess did your dad have at this point?
Oops. Yeah, might as well answer both. Yeah, he was. Oh gosh, how many siblings did he have? I think he was the youngest. I think he was the youngest of 7 or 8.
Okay.
And it was kind of split down the middle of boys and girls. So he was the youngest in his family, and I got the opportunity to meet almost all of them because none of them ever immigrated from Italy.
Oh wow.
But I did manage to meet a majority of them in their elder years. This was many years ago now. So he came from a pretty sizable family. Myself, I'm the oldest of 4, so I have 2 brothers. So it's me, my brother Gino, my sister Maria, and my brother Johnny. And between me and Johnny, we're 10 years apart.
Gotcha.
Yeah, 3 and 7 for the other 2.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Cool. So back to your father, you said he got here around when you were 2.
I was about 2 years old. Yeah.
How was that split of year of not seeing him? I know you were young at that point, but have you ever gotten any stories of how you were when you first seen him again? Or
I'm glad you asked that because it was actually just this last year that I asked my mom, what was it like when he first came, and how did I react? Because I just had never thought about it. I'd known for a long time. I can't remember when I exactly found out that he had to stay back, but I think for majority of my life, I'm pretty sure that I had known that. But I never ever posed the question to him or to my mom for whatever reason. I just didn't. This last year. Well, since the whole COVID thing, and not being able to go back to see my mom very often, because we used to go pretty often to visit, but in place of that, I'm calling her like every other day, every 2 or 3 days, something like that. And we have every time we're on the phone, we have a conversation about 45, 50 minutes, always.
Wow.
And we just catching up on a lot of different things. But during one of those conversations this last year, I was just started thinking about, well, how did I react? I was 2 years old. Was I afraid of him? Just what was it like for me? So I asked her, and I was really, it was heartwarming to know that, and the way she even said it was very heartwarming. That, oh, you went right to him.
Wow.
You just went right to him and ran to him. Daddy's here. And she said that she had essentially kind of primed the situation a bit by showing pictures and so on, and telling me stories about him. He's going to be coming to stay with us now. So that made me feel pretty good, but I don't know why I had not ever asked the question before, because I know it was difficult.
Right.
I know it was very, very difficult for my mom, being here in the States. Certainly there was family around her, but more or less on her own as far as mom and dad. That's a very tough thing. So she had some support from my grandpa and uncle, and also from my great uncle Vincenzo and his wife Frances, my great aunt. They were actually also my godparents. They were very, very important figures in our family for many, many reasons, but not the least of which is that they helped my mom through those first couple of years a tremendous amount in raising me. And if I could go back and relive some of that and then remember it, it would be really cool.
Wow.
But I can kind of
imagine it.
I can kind of imagine what it was like just thinking about a lot of the old scenery, the houses and neighborhoods, the cars, the buses, the people, the neighborhood stores and everything that I do remember growing up. And I can kind of get a sense for it, on what it might have been like. But that would be a cool thing to relive.
No, that's deep. So I kind of want to bring a topic up. I was going to wait, but it's regarding, you just said, you can only imagine how tough it was for your mom raising you on her own. What is something you could tell the people about the importance of parenting, of having both parents in the child's life?
Oh,
as you being a parent, and for your parents, for your parents growing.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot there. Part of this, I think, for me is also kind of also. There's still that element of being ingrained in the whole Italian ethnicity, extended family, and not that that's going to be different for any other nationality, because the strong sense of family is important across different nationalities for certain. But that was just a really important aspect of it. I honestly can't even really remember. I certainly don't remember those 2 years when he was not around. I was 2 years old. But after that, I don't. On the other side of that, I don't remember a whole lot of things, occurrences, family gatherings, just where he wasn't there. He was always there. And that, I think, was really important in just understanding, what was I going to pull out of that understanding of having a mom and dad around all the time, and being really lucky to have that. It for sure influenced me in later years when, after Vic and I got married and we started having kids, being around for our kids was really, really important to me. And again, I think it was just having had that and wanting to give it back, and seeing in some cases or hearing about cases where some kids aren't lucky enough to have that, both mother and father figure in their lives. And what are you going to do about it? For me, it helped to shape how I was at least trying to be as a father and be there for as many things as possible. We had Joseph, our first child, when I was still in school. And it was kind of good and it was kind of bad. It was bad in the sense that it was kind of a bit of pressure because I was trying to finish school and everything, and the additional responsibility of raising a kid, that's a lot. But it was kind of really good, and also the way that being in schools did in fact actually offer some flexibility for me. So I was able to work hard and continue and finish my education. But I didn't really miss a beat with regard to being the dad. I was there for everything. I'd changed more diapers than I'd care to think about these days. But that was the best. I think that out of everything, anything that I could take out of growing up and growing up with my mom and dad and other family around me, it's that piece of it, giving it back to the kids that we raised. And it was, I think, very, very rewarding because I was able to see a lot of things with the kids, go to their schools, get involved in their schooling and going into their school. They used to have this little thing where they would bring parents in to teach the kids what they do at work.
Yeah.
And I had a chemistry magic show that I used to do for a while. And I did that for I think essentially all of my kids.
Wow.
In school. So it was all that little stuff, and taking them fishing and taking them to movies and just playing, doing whatever. I think that was the important thing because it's just it's sad seeing when a child doesn't have one or the other figure and they really can use it and really need it. And for whatever reason, there's not enough involvement. That can really be tough. It's sad for many reasons, but sometimes it's by necessity because just maybe economics and people having to work so hard and sometimes moving off to a distance in order to get work, which I had to do for 1 year.
Oh, wow.
But it was later down the road. But sometimes those things in life kind of come up, and it just raises, I think, the importance and the awareness of how important it is to have two parent figures in the family. It's important.
Absolutely. And one thing I always say is somebody asked me the other day, I was on their podcast, and they asked me, why is fatherhood important to you? And my answer was, at that moment, is because fathers are 50% of the child. So, like it's the other child's half. So the child needs both of you guys, and together you guys make them one.
Yeah.
And that's how they were made, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that, just you saying that after 2 years old, when your father came back, you just ran straight to your father. It's like basically you were missing that half. Yeah. And then once you seen him, you just, and then seeing them together, it made your brain right, and then focus, and it helped you elevate to now when you're older, what you wanted to pass on to your kids. And it just helps. I think things like that help a person's future,
Yeah, even though I don't remember the exact moment, probably ingrained in the brain was this situation, this experience that you're describing, where somehow, even as a 2-year-old, I recognize the importance of it, and you take that with you. The brain is a pretty amazing, a pretty amazing thing.
You're in the chemist field.
Yeah, it very likely there were some connections made there that kind of stuck throughout and influenced myself as a parent then eventually.
Right. That's powerful.
Yeah.
On that topic, I probably asked it already, but what is something that you used or you gathered from your childhood life, from your parents, that you learned that you then implemented and took to bring to your kids' life, like upbringing?
Yeah, I'm sure there were a lot of things. I'm trying to think of some things specifically. There are a number of things that I'll distill it down a little bit more rather than really specific things. And I know that there were a lot of really specific things, but what it more kind of boils down to is just having those experiences as a family. And why are you doing things? Why are you sharing these different things with your kids? And, maybe one specific thing, like, for example, might be gardening. So I got a lot of that from my dad. And I started keeping a garden after moving away from home. And when we finally were able to move into a house, that's the first thing I started doing. And so I've had gardens at every home that we've lived in over the years. And that was because of something that I learned from my dad. But that's just the physical aspect. Planting a garden, the physical work that you're doing to, create some really nice, tasty vegetables and fruits that you can enjoy, and they're really healthy for you. And I tried to pass that down to some of my kids as well, although none of them are really interested in that much in gardening. But that's not the point. The point is that you, just the same way that my dad taught me about taking care of something and nurturing it and watching it grow.
Wow. And
seeing it develop into something that is, more mighty than the first little seed that it started out as, is an important lesson within that.
Wow.
So it's for me and my kids, it's less about the actual gardening aspect of it, but it's more about that aspect of whatever you're going to do it with a real passion, and understand that a lot of these things are really nurturing relationships with people, nurturing those. Those are the kind of things I think about when you ask that question. Right. Those are the kind of things that come to mind. I'm sure there's a whole bunch of really specific things too, as well, but that's really one of the more important ones, I think.
That's very important. Just to get off topic a little bit, how did your passion for cars come about? Because you're
man. Yeah.
And name some of your cars. Let me hear some.
I think I could tell you. We'd be here for a while. But, my passion for cars had to come from my Uncle Jerry, mostly.
Yeah.
My Uncle Mike had a really cool car, and it got stolen. It was like a '68 Impala, blue Impala.
Oh, wow.
He loved this car. He really loved this car, and it was a really sharp, sporty looking car. And that car got stolen, was never seen again.
Wow.
But the one uncle that I had that was really into cars was my Uncle Jerry. He was my youngest uncle, and he had inherited an Impala. What was it? I think it was also another Impala, a 4-door Impala. It was a Chevy from my Uncle Louis, and this car had like this little 4-cylinder engine in it, automatic. It was a nice car, but it was just a slow, klutzy little car. Jerry gets it, and the first thing that he does is he drops the 350 in it, and a Hurst transmission, manual transmission in it, and he's laying rubber and patches all around the neighborhood with this thing. And I'll tell you one story in a minute. Remind me to tell you. But he used to take me everywhere. So I was in this car all the time. And I washed it a lot because that was one thing I had to do. I washed it for him many, many times. But after having that car, he progressed into a GTO. And then the first new car that he ever bought was a 1973 Camaro. It had a 350 in it. And that's the car I actually learned to drive in.
Oh, wow.
So my initial love for cars was all stemmed from that. And also, I'd have to say, I had a childhood buddy in early grade school who was big into cars and making models and everything.
Oh,
and
wow. Like little ones?
yeah, and I had got into that as well, and doing all the Hot Wheels and all that stuff big time. Watching NASCAR and everything. And that just eventually grew into, when I wanted a car or needed a car, I never really had that big muscle car or anything like that, but I had some nice cars growing up, and now I've got some pretty nice ones. But my love really came from an appreciation. That's a really important. Appreciation aspect is really important. You don't want to ever take things for granted.
Absolutely.
But that's where it came from for me, those early years. And I'm a bit more, as far as cars go, I like fast, but I don't usually drive really fast. I'm more about the aesthetics of it.
Yeah.
And that's just me. That's okay. My uncle, the part that I didn't take from my uncle was the whole muscle spinning
part.
your wheels and smoking things. That I never took from him. But this story I was going to tell you that I want to say was, I remember this pretty distinctly. It was a summer day. I was probably about 10. And I think Jerry and my grandma had a little argument. Mm-hmm. Sounded like, I think they had it out or something. But they had a little argument. Jerry took off, pulled out the driveway, went halfway down the block to the stop sign, and then ripped the tires and spun them out for almost the entire whole next block. And my grandma came running out, and I'm sitting on the step of her porch, and she says, "Frankie, was that Jerry?" And I think something really kind of clicked in my head that I should really be careful here. And I said, no, it was Jerry. So I really played dumb. So that was one that he owed me. But yeah, that was a long-winded answer to it. Really came from my uncles, really.
Gotcha. Yeah. That's perfect. And then your love for cars, and then where did the love from cooking come from?
Oh, definitely from my mom and grandma.
Okay.
The whole aspect of, as I was mentioning, the whole aspect of growing up and Sunday dinners, holiday dinners and everything, it was all about cooking. And my mom and grandma in the kitchens, whether it was at our house or my grandma's house, we were across the street anyway, right there. But I learned so many things, how to make pasta, raviolis, gnocchi. I remember more of my learnings from them was about smell versus the amounts of different ingredients. I knew the ingredients for sure, but I'm 99% certain that I don't think my mom ever wrote down a single recipe ever.
Wow.
100% sure that my grandma never wrote down a recipe ever. It all came from memory and from smells and textures and taste.
It's interesting.
As you're cooking, you always should be tasting things along the way.
Right.
But that was definitely something that came from my mom and grandma. And it started out with trying to replicate and duplicate their recipes after I had moved away. Trying to duplicate their recipes, and then it just expanded from there, learning new techniques and learning new dishes, learning about new foods. Yeah. And Vicky and I just love it all.
Yeah.
But that's a really special thing. That's another one of these things for me. It's like I mentioned, the whole gardening aspect. It's, things like gardening, music, cooking. People talk about what they're passionate about, and that's really, really important. I don't know how other people define it, but sometimes I hear people talk about, yeah, I'm passionate about this, I'm passionate about that. But what they really mean is, yeah, I like doing that. When you're passionate about something, you just put everything into it. I mean, everything. And that's what you really need in order to make things right, especially with something like cooking. I'm really convinced, I've told many people this, but I'm 100% convinced that if you take two people in the same, two kitchens, completely the same, you give them the exact same ingredients, and this is the dish you're gonna make. One of them loves to cook, the other one does not. Give them the recipe, give them the ingredients, the utensils. One of those dishes is going to turn out fantastic, and the other one's going to turn out pretty average. It's what you put into it.
Right. That's a good lesson for life too.
Exactly. That's why I mentioned it. It's
right.
not just about the cooking thing.
Yeah.
But when you're passionate about something, you go all in, whether it's your career, being a mom or a dad, everything, you have to go all in.
I like that. So this is the next big question. You're a girl dad. Explain the girl dad thing. How is it having a girl, and how is it being a girl dad?
Oh boy,
I need all the advice.
Or they wrap you around your finger. That's one thing to be careful of. But being conscious of it, that it's happening, is half the battle. That's important.
Right.
It's definitely a little different. Boys and girls, for sure.
Right.
Raising them is a little bit different. I'm not sure what the inherent difference really stems from. I can't say I'm really sure, but I do know that from my experience raising a daughter and raising two sons, they were each very different. But here's another thing, and I'm just kind of thinking out loud here right now. I like doing that sometimes. It wasn't just boys and girls. I mean, each one was completely different from the next. Each one needed a different level of attention, a different type of attention. I'm not sure that's something you can generalize between boys and girls, but certainly being cognizant of there's different needs for your children, be it from boy or girl or just the different personalities. They all needed something different from us. They all challenged us in different ways. And I guess, there certainly were some challenges. I guess if you don't mind, I would turn it around just a little bit and go back to the statement of it's not just about boys raising a boy versus raising a girl, and there are differences, but about raising individuals and being cognizant of here's a person that is growing up and needs their parents to nurture them and to help them along, and just to be aware of those different needs. Joseph and Eric, totally different kids.
Gotcha.
Two boys, totally different.
So it's just basically about I like that, because a lot of times you know, is always like, you know, the girl dad, what do you do with the girl? What do you do with the boy? But that's one important thing that I like that you said is basically having the specific needs for each individual. And that's a bar. I like that. But I gotta hit you with another question on the girl dad thing because I'm trying to take notes here.
Yeah.
What was it like meeting Michelle's first boyfriend?
That's a good one. I'm pretty sure this was her first boyfriend that I'm remembering, and actually it was pretty easy because this kid was a really nice kid.
Okay.
He really, really was. I don't remember it, but I can be 100% certain that I was probably really apprehensive and cautious and, maybe giving him the eyes. And certainly had I'm certain I would have had my antennas up for sure. But this first boyfriend she had, and she was with him for a good number of years, was a really good kid and made it pretty easy. He was a nice kid. He was great to have around. Vic and I loved having him around. So it was actually not that bad.
Not that bad.
There were a couple of other boyfriends where it was a little bit more difficult.
Yeah. Really
difficult. Those are maybe this is best left alone. But that particular one.
Noted.
Yeah, that particular one. The only thing that I would say about those kind of situations, and hopefully you never have to come up against that, is that you fix things fast.
Okay.
That's important because some people are not people that you want to be around, and you certainly don't want your son or daughter to be around.
Noted.
So, her situation for her first boyfriend made it pretty easy.
That's good. I have a question here for you. So what were your just to get back on that the other track, what were your key morals when raising your children, basically? And that's kind of it's kind of something that I asked previously, but it's like we always gravitate something from our upbringing. So what's one key moral basically that you've implemented into?
Yeah. That's a good question, and I'm gonna think about the specifics around it while we're talking here. But I think the answer to that question for me was really kind of entrenched in having some experience within pretty solid religious background. So my part of my whole upbringing, as I mentioned, was Catholic school, Catholic church, et cetera. The neighborhoods all focused in on that part of community. That was really important to me. I really liked it. I very, very much appreciate that I grew up with that background being there. As much as I can remember, once in a while not wanting to go to church and getting up and trying to get away from it. Ultimately, I really liked being in church. I liked being in the Catholic grade school, and I enjoyed it. I had learned a lot. I had some really important mentors from that point in time in my life, and I wanted them to have that. That was one thing that we really instilled in them in the early days. We really wanted them to have that level of upbringing that was not just about education, math, reading, science, etc., all super important, but also about just the whole understanding of who we are, the importance of your beliefs, and living by those beliefs. Not that we wanted to force anything on them, but we gave them these initial experiences with school and church and so on to help them to formulate their ideas on, okay, so what is this all going to mean to me now?
Right.
Again, as much as I had a very, very positive upbringing with that, I didn't want to force that level of detail on them. But you gotta give them the food, you gotta give them the nourishment to experience and make their own judgments. And that was really important to us. And the other thing, of course, is raising them with the just the understanding of just being and trying to be a good person and trying to do good by people, by your friends, the rest of your family, by your friends, your elders, and just people that you meet in everyday life.
Absolutely.
That was an important thing for us. And I hope that they appreciated that we did that, but I think they do. I think they do. They all have their own, belief systems at this point in their life, and but I like to think that they've grown to be really, really upstanding young adults, and
taking something from what you had.
I hope so.
So just to wrap it up, I have these two last questions. Well, one is an extended question, and the other just a general question I usually ask at the end of DADAcation podcast. Can you let the people know about the Epilepsy Foundation?
Sure.
And your involvement and why it started?
Yeah. For us, it started because our oldest son, Joseph, eventually we had found out that he had epilepsy. And we found out for sure when he was a senior in high school. So it was kind of late. But, thinking back on it, he probably had some symptoms for sure in junior high, possibly even when he was a toddler. He used to have these little starry-eyed moments that would come and go, and we just thought nothing of them. But they very possibly were little mini seizures. But down the road, he developed and had epilepsy. And most of the reason why we missed it for a good part of his upbringing is because they turned out that they were always at night. And so this one morning when he was in high school, we went into his room, Vicky went into his room, and he was in a full-blown grand mal seizure. So that's where that all started, and then the whole doctors and medication, et cetera, that all kicked into gear and so on. And he was being treated, had medication, and I always tell this story about Joseph in it seems a little bit odd. It's a little bit odd saying it, but it's kind of true. Joseph, even though he ended up passing away from this ailment, he was kind of one of the lucky ones in some regards. A lot of people who have epilepsy, young adults, just have a lot of problems. And depending on what kind of seizure burden they have, they might have one a week or one a day, one every 6 months, and have different types of different results from that. But some people have many seizures a day, and this is it's a tough road for them to hoe, especially being young adults trying to get into school. You can't drive, etc. there's some really big challenges with kids just doing the normal things, going to school, eventually getting a job, etc. Joseph was able to do that. He finished high school, he went to college, he got a degree, had a really good job. He was living in Philadelphia at the time, and he was being managed pretty well with his medication. But a few months before he passed, we could tell some things were changing. There was a possibility that his medication was switched to a generic, whatever it was. There was something that was a little bit off. And he ended up passing away in his sleep. It was from, technically what he passed from was SUDEP, sudden unexplained death in epilepsy. There's just not a lot known about it. It's not just having a seizure at night and passing away from it. It's much more than that. It's like a critical storm of cardiovascular, CNS issues that come up all of a sudden, and it just takes them. So he passed away. Right around that time, just before he passed, a few months before, we had started planning, well, we should think about, there's the Epilepsy Foundation New England. They have a walk. That was one of the first things that we were made aware of. And let's do that. Let's get Joseph there, and we'll get a team together, and we'll do this walk for them. Well, he never got to do it, of course, because he passed before the walk. But we did it. And that was the beginning of, fast forward now, almost 10 years. More than 10 years now. Of doing all sorts of things with the foundation. So that little spark got me involved in the foundation. So I've been on their board of directors for about 6 years now. We started Joseph's Hope charities. At first it was Joseph's Hope Scholarship Fund, and now it's expanded to an emergency fund also, where we raise money from events. And we specifically target those kids that I just was telling you about, those kids who have those challenges because of epilepsy, of getting into school and so on. We're helping them. And same thing with families and an emergency fund. So it's come a long way, and we've raised a lot of money actually so far. I'm really proud to say that from the whole start, when we started this with walks and then moved into doing concerts and things, we're getting really, really close to $250,000 raised.
Wow.
Over about the last 7-8 years. And I think a lot of kids have benefited from that. But it was really important, ultimately, digging in for both Vic and I, getting and digging into the Epilepsy Foundation, whether it's with me through the board or the events or whatever it might be. That was a really important part of the whole healing process with Joseph and losing him, because it wasn't for naught. If there's anything that's going to come good from a situation like that, which just seems 100% all bad, however you want to slice it. But you can make some good for other people out of situations like that, and that's what we've tried to do.
Wow. Ooh. And then was there anything specifically or last words that you may have wanted to tell Joseph that you never thought you could have told him? Or
wow, you know what? Nobody has ever asked me that question. Wow. Maybe maybe one thing that I guess a conversation I would have liked to have had with him would have been more around that, this is gonna all be okay. And we're there, and other people are there to help you through it. Because certainly there would have been a lot more challenges down the road. If there's anything I would have wanted to say to him or have a talk with him about or help him experiences, I guess it would be that. No one's ever asked me that question.
I really think that's an important question. And part of DADAcation is I want it to be a conversation of healing. So through conversation, especially with you having that loss, that I want you to still have that connection with him and still be able to talk to him, even though he's not here, but he's still here.
Yeah. That for sure we know. That for sure we know.
Absolutely. My heart is heavy right now. I'm sorry. So just to end it, can you just give the people some sort of advice that you would give to like new fathers or just fatherhood in general? Oh
man. The one biggest thing I have to say is just savor every moment, because there's tough times for sure, but there's a lot of good times, and savor every moment of it. Life goes by pretty fast, and savor it all and recognize it. Recognize your fortunes that you have in having a situation with raising your kids and so on. There's so many experiences that you'll have with school and friends and fun get-togethers, and it's all there waiting to be had. And as it comes along, suck in every second of it.
Wow. Yeah. Well, there you guys have it. Thank you guys for tuning in to DADAcation podcast. Frank, it's been amazing having this conversation with you. And I thank you.
Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Guys, thank you again. Once again, this is DADAcation.